Alrighty, hello everyone. This is my exam one for programming for data analytics for fall 2020. Pretty much we're asked to parse the Socratic survey result and provide a summary report. Pretty much in this Excel file right here, we have the students who were in this class for this specific day. So for example, the 26th of August in 2020, these people were in there. These are their U2C IDs, and here are their answers to the questions on the Socratic website. And so pretty much we're asked to parse this and be able to submit a sample report very similar to this guy right here. And so for pretty much of this, I use Jupyter notebooks to do this as required. So let's go ahead and pull that guy up and I'll be able to kind of explain everything that's going on. So here we are, here is our Jupyter notebook. And so pretty much before we begin, we have this file that's very important that we use for reference. It's the student list fall 2020 file. We can open it and have a look and see what its contents are. All right, so we got it open here. And as we can see, this column right here consists of all the students that are in the class, and this is their column of UTC IDs. And so pretty much we use this guy to actually reference and see in the Socratic and just see like, which student was in the class. So it's actually what this first cell right here does. Pretty much we import pandas to be able to use all of their functions. We go ahead and read the Excel file and we convert it to a data frame. That way we can perform some functions on it. And then we kind of just go ahead and iterate through the data frame and we make a dictionary of a student. So the dictionary consists of the name, which is the name of the student, and also the UTC ID of the student. And we go ahead and append it to the list. And we go ahead and sort them by the student name. That way we can have like a clean report later so it's not kind of jumbled up and everywhere. And then we just go ahead and return that, and we can see here we go ahead and run the function and it takes in the parameter of the actual file for that. So we can run it and we can see here it goes ahead and returns that list of the dictionary. And so now that we got that out of the way, we actually have to read in this file. And now the actual read Excel file in pandas, it reads it like one by one by one by one. So say for example, whenever it reads in this column, it starts off here and it kind of just goes down like that. And then this is a separate column. This is a separate column as well. And as we can see here, this little cell, we go ahead and read that certain Excel file for that specific day. We go ahead and turn off the headers since we don't actually have proper headers on there. And then we go ahead and convert it to a data frame. And then we go ahead and display it. Go ahead and run it, make sure it still works. Then just as I was saying, it goes ahead and kind of reads it up and down. So starting in the A right here, it kind of goes down. Like in the first one, it's going to be Data Science 2020 on August 26th. So that's going to be our first column. The second column consists of these guys right here. As we can see, there's not too much we can do with this guy in the form how it is now. And so I've already included kind of like some comments here, just saying, what all we're doing. So pretty much in this guy, we're actually getting these in a better looking format that we can actually work out with. Let's go ahead and run it. Then I can go ahead and kind of show you and explain what's going on with this guy. So it's pretty much the same code as the cell above. We go ahead and read in the Excel format. And also go ahead and create an empty data frame that we're also going to toss these guys into. And then what we're doing here is we're actually going ahead and creating a UTC ID column in that data frame. And then here we're doing a special little function. We're actually pulling the fourth row, or actually, I'm sorry, the fourth column. And if we go back up here, we can scroll down and we can see that the fourth column actually consists of the proper UTC ID. So that way we can go ahead and pull that fourth column, and then that we can grab rows 6 through 29. So the sixth one corresponds with the first UTC ID in the list. Then we can go ahead and go all the way down and grab the 29th one. And so that way we can pretty much grab all of the UTC IDs that were in here. And that way we don't have to actually manually go in and edit this Excel file. So that way down the line, if we need to do any more of these, we can just plug it in here and it'll go ahead and do the work for us. That way we don't have to actually go ahead and manually edit the data file. It kind of just does it for us. And so that way, whenever we do grab the UTC ID, we go ahead and stick it in the column. We call it UTC ID. We can use that later. And it's the exact same situation with the names of the student. We go ahead and grab the 0 column, and we go ahead and grab the same thing, 6 through 29. And then here is a special little thing I did. I went ahead and dropped the duplicates that were in the UTC ID column. That way, in case for some reason someone decided that they were going to enter it twice, we can say right here, MLR948, he's in there twice, so we go ahead and drop him because we don't want any duplicates or else it'll go ahead and throw off all of our calculations. And we can go ahead and print it off, and we can see now we actually have a really clean list that we can use and reference, but we're not just done yet because as you can see here, for example, this guy right here, he's uppercase. This guy's lowercase. That's a non-existent value. And as we can see here in the names of students also, sometimes they'd put their UTC ID in the names of the students. Well, it's kind of not good for now because we'll have to do some extra calculations, but as part of the data science process, cleaning the data set and actually getting it into a usable format is very important. So now here I went ahead and created a special function that will pretty much go ahead and pretty much get these in a more usable format. And then we'll get down there here in a second. Let's see here. This guy right here is actually a function I created to do exactly this. Instead of having to just do this line by line, I went ahead and created a function to actually do this. And also went ahead and tossed in the thing as well to go ahead and filter out the duplicates in the names of students. That way, if a student was to go ahead and enter themselves twice, we can just go ahead and filter out them. So that way we only have one instance of them. And for this one, I also went ahead and tested it and made sure this function actually worked on a different data set. So it's pretty much the same exact format as the other one, it's just a different one to make sure it actually works across other ones. And so I created this, make it to where all you have to do is pass in the file name. So for example, class 2020-09-02, blah, 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 and then the actual date. That way we can write this down for future reference. And then we can go ahead and print this off. As we can see now, it filters out the duplicates in the names of students, filters out the duplicates in the UTC ID, and it pretty much gets in a usable format, but we're not just done yet. Then here I go ahead and, oh yeah, let me run that, make sure he still works. Yep, works as intended. Go ahead and run you, make sure you work as intended. Perfect. And then this guy, I go ahead and run him on a different data set to make sure he still works, and just to make sure it works for other ones, let's go and have a look. Let's try a different one. Let's try this one. We can go ahead and copy you. And then we can just go ahead and paste your name in there. And then we'll run the cell and make sure he works, and he still works. And now this is where it actually gets interesting to where we can get a really clean list that we can use for future reference. So pretty much here, this function right here, it takes in the file name of that certain day. So for example, that guy right there that we were just using also takes in the file name of the full students list. So the one we were just working with, the student list fall 2020 file. So we can actually read the clean list in and compare the other two and the actual day of that certain file. So we go ahead and read the students in using the read students function. And then we go ahead and use the return list ID student function that we just used and created. That way we can actually get these two clean lists so we can actually get one clean data set together. And then here I go ahead and create the correct student list as an empty list. That way we can add the values into it. Now right here, we go ahead and iterate through that actual student list for the day. And then we go ahead and iterate through the full student list as well. And we see if the row in the data frame of the UTC ID is equal to the student ID in the full student list, then we just go ahead and append that student to the list. And what this does here is it pretty much searches through this list here. So it sees like, okay, if we have FBG798 right there, and they're also in the list of the full student list, then we just go ahead and add them in to the corrected student list. And like, if they're not in the list, we go ahead and continue. That way we can iterate through. And then we go ahead and convert it to a data frame because we will need to use this later and have more functions with it. We can go ahead and run you, make sure you still work. And then we go ahead and return it, and we also sort this guy by the name as well. And then that way, whenever we actually run this guy and print it out, we can see now, remember the one before, it would be like, oh, this person didn't enter their last name. Like, this person entered their UTC ID as their name. This guy didn't enter his full name. And now we actually don't have to bother with this anymore. Now it just pretty much goes through and it goes ahead and just makes a clean list for us to actually see which students were in the class. So say for example, this person was in the class for the day, that person was in the class for the day. And it pretty much makes a clean list for us to be able to actually use later. And then now here is where we actually start to create something that looks very similar to the sample report. Let's take a look. Let's go ahead and run him, make sure he works. And we can see here, I'm going to explain the code here in just a second, but we can see that now we have the name of the person, their UTC ID, and their attendance for the 7th of September in 2020, as we can see. Let's see here. Oh, I don't think I was in here that day. I'm so sorry. Yep, as we can see here, it goes ahead and checks and see if they were in that list. So let's go ahead and explain this code for a bit. So all these functions I've been previously creating, the return the clean list for the day, the return list ID students, and the read students, all are pretty much used to actually build and create this full list right here. So that way we can kind of make it modular. If we need to use one function, we can just use it. This guy right here is a really big function. And we also use this guy later to actually create the big list, but we'll get to that here in a second. So just like the other one, we go ahead and pass in the file name of that certain day. We pass in a data frame to append that's special. I'll talk about it here in a second. We also passed in the full list of students and the day for that specific day. And now here we want to go ahead and create the student list for the day, and we use that function we just created, the return clean list for day. And that way we can actually get that clean list we just created using that file name. We also go ahead and pass in the full list of students. That way we can actually use that function and the actual day for it. And here, I go ahead and create the student in list yes or no column, or actually not a column, sorry, a list. That way, if the student actually is in the list, we can go ahead and append whether they are or they are not. And then we go ahead and create a full student list to reference using the read students. And then here, I go ahead and iterate through all the students in the list. The one we just used for reference. So say, for example, if that student name is in the student list for the day, .name.values That's pretty much dereferencing it, going ahead and getting all the values in the column for name for the student list. And say, for example, yes, if they were in that list for the day, then we can go ahead and append a 1, meaning that they were in for the day. But if they weren't in the list for the day, we go ahead and append a 0, meaning they weren't in there for the day. And then here, remember where I mentioned we're passing in the data frame to append? This is going to be used recursively, meaning that whatever data frame we add into the list, it'll go ahead and append. It'll go ahead and append that certain day. So say for example right here, kind of like the comment I made said, say on 8/26/2020, we can pass that in for the day, and it goes ahead and adds that as a column into it. And it goes ahead and appends all the values for that day. And then we go ahead and print off that data frame, and then we go ahead and return the data frame to append. That way, if we want to add another column later, we can just pass that in again and actually use this function again. And then here, we go ahead and create the full list that we want to use to append. So I just went ahead and used that previous student list. That way we don't have to do anything special with it. We can just go ahead and do it. And we make it into a data frame. That way we can go ahead and access these special values in it. And then I go ahead and call that function the read clean append column for the day, the one that we just created and explained. We pass in the file name that we're looking to read the values from, the actual data frame that we want to append that information for, and the full student list and the actual day for it. So whenever we run this cell, as we can see here, it goes ahead and reads through, and just like I was saying earlier, how if Mr. Riley Shipley was in the class for the day, it goes ahead and lets him know, like, yes, he was in that list for the day, but since I was not, it goes ahead and adds a 0 in there. And as we can see here, we can also kind of get a nice little Excel looking view here. And now that we have this function, this is our big function that we'll pretty much use recursively. That way we can actually create and build the full report just like it asks us for. Now there's a lot, now it looks like there's a lot going on in this function, but there's not too much. Let me go ahead and run you, make sure you still work. And yes, you do still work. So here, I'm going to go ahead and show you this, and then I'm going to go ahead and kind of explain what this cell does and exactly how it achieves this. But pretty much it uses that previous function we created, the read clean append column for the day. And it goes ahead and recursively calls and adds the list onto them, and we keep passing in the different files. That way it keeps adding them. So like we got the 26th, we got the 31st, we got the 2nd, we got the 7th, and then we got the 9th right here, and it goes ahead, calls that function, and goes ahead and adds the certain values in whether the student was here or not during that day. So this function right here, it's just pretty much a simple create and build the full list attendance. I didn't have it passing in any variables. It's kind of like you just go ahead and run this function. It kind of just does the work for you. So we go ahead and make some strings here relating to the actual files. So instead of having to manually type them in and make it look all messy, I just go ahead and make the strings for it. And then here, I go ahead and make the student list class attendance. It's going to be a data frame using the full student list. And we go ahead and read the students in. So say for example, right here, we get like the name and the UTC ID from that read students, which comes from the student list fall 2020 Excel file. So just like I was mentioning earlier, how the actual read clean append column for the day function works is we pass in the file name of the actual file that we're reading in that we want to do. Am I recording? I hope so. We pass in the same student list class attendance. That way it keeps recursively adding. As we can see here, the actual Jupyter, it kind of shows you one by one, like we start off with the 26th, and then we have the 31st, then we have the 2nd, then we have the 7th, and then we add the 9th. So it keeps cursively recalling this every time we call this, and every time we pass it in and pass in the correct information, it goes ahead and does the calculations and add them. and then we go ahead and return it. And then we can do the full student attendance, and we can just call the actual function to do all the work for us. And then we can go ahead and there's a special function in Python and Pandas, the to_Excel file. Pretty much we just call it on a data frame and we just pass in whatever we want the name to be. So our example, full student attendance report, CPSC4180. And we can see if we look in our file, oh, where'd it go? Oh, this guy right here. Let's go and stretch you out a little bit. That way we can actually be able to see and get a better idea. As we can see now, it goes ahead and adds all the value in. We got the name of the people, we got their UTC ID, and we also just have the list of like the people who were here on certain days and who wasn't here on those certain days. So to make sure this guy still works properly, we can go ahead and save you. Oh no. Okay, we'll just go ahead and save you real quick. Make sure this guy still works. Say for example, we can just call you exam 01. Then we can go ahead and run you again and see it still does the same thing, just like I was mentioning, uses that read clean append column for the day to actually go ahead and recursively call, keep adding, keep building. And let's go check and make sure. Yep, we got that Excel file right there, just like how it was before. Then go ahead and stretch those out, make them look nice and pretty. As we can see here, it goes ahead and makes the report for us. So whenever I designed this and started working on this, I wanted to have a lot of functions that we can just reuse over and over and be able to recursively build on them and be able to use them instead of kind of just doing cell by cell, copying, pasting code. I remember in one of my very beginning programming classes, one of my professors told me that if you're copying, pasting code over and over again, you just need to make a function. And I thought about that whenever I was working on this. I was like, I just need to make some functions to do this for us. That way, as we get down the line, like the return clean list for the day function, this one uses the multiple functions we've made, the read students function, the return list ID students, and pretty much makes it to where we can get this really clean looking output. And so, there it is. You can just go ahead, double check, yeah, got all the names. And we got their availability, very cool. Alrighty, that is it.